Gabriel Morello gave me 47 days to find him a bride. And the part that made it impossible had nothing to do with the deadline. It was the condition. She could not be a woman impressed by his money, frightened by his name, or willing to sit beside him for one glittering dinner and disappear before the linen was washed. She had to be real enough that his mother would believe in her when the house went quiet again. Men like Gabriel do not usually come to women like me. They send assistants, lawyers, sometimes sisters. Once an underboss with beautiful manners and a concealed pistol who asked whether confidentiality extended to family embarrassment. Gabriel came himself. He walked into Rossi Private Introductions on a Monday just before closing. Wearing a charcoal coat and the kind of restraint that makes receptionists forget to breathe. My office sits on a side street off Madison, behind a florist and above a jewelry repair shop. Exactly the kind of place wealthy people prefer when they want romance handled with the discretion of estate planning. I am Bianca Rossi, daughter of Rosa Rossi, who built that business by protecting people from humiliation. Not by manufacturing fairy tales. We kept widowers from proposing to their grief. We kept brilliant women from mistaking panic for chemistry. We kept heirs from marrying anyone who smiled too quickly at a trust fund, mostly. We kept lonely people from having to admit in public that loneliness had finally become louder than pride. Gabriel Morello was 39. The head of a logistics empire with legitimate offices, immaculate accountants, and family stories that never stood too close to sunlight. Newspapers called him a businessman when he donated to hospitals, a power broker when politicians needed him, and a mob boss when they wanted readers to shiver. The FBI preferred cleaner nouns: boss, consigliere, crew, family. Society women preferred not to say his name at all unless they were indoors, when he sat across from me. He did not glance at the diplomas on my wall or the antique clock or the framed letter from a couple my mother had matched in 1994. He only said, "My mother is turning 72 in 6 weeks. And she has asked for one thing." "That sounds harmless," I said. "It is not." I opened a file. What did she ask for? A woman I could bring to Sunday supper without lying. That was a better answer than most men gave on a first meeting. It was also a more dangerous one. I asked the usual questions: children, history, habits, faith, deal breakers, temper, privacy. Whether he wanted a wife or the appearance of one. He answered plainly enough to unsettle me. He wanted children if children ever trusted him enough to arrive. He did not drink much because men around him already did too many stupid things without help. He disliked public restaurants, small talk, orchids, and women who confused indifference with mystery. He liked old films, black coffee, exact timepieces. And his mother's Sunday sauce. He had never been engaged. He had never come close. "Why now?" I asked. He looked past me to the window where late light had turned the city brass. 3 weeks ago my mother missed the last 2 steps coming down from her garden. I waited. She told everyone she was fine. His jaw shifted once. She was not. There it was, not softness exactly, but the bruise beneath discipline. He told me the rest in pieces. Serafina Morello still ran her kitchen like a duchess and her garden like a general. But a cardiologist had started using words like conserve, pace, adapt. Nothing fatal, nothing melodramatic. Just the sort of warning adult children hear too late. The kind that says your parent is still here. But time has stopped being abstract. There was also Morello Family Holdings, a private trust company his grandfather had built when men of that generation distrusted both government and emotion. The board review was scheduled for September. Family members sat on it beside attorneys and advisors. No one could unseat Gabriel in a single afternoon. But men with old money have perfected the art of using procedure to dress suspicion as governance. He had no spouse, no heir, no publicly stable household. And several relatives had begun confusing succession planning with moral commentary. "So this is about optics," I said. He met my eyes. "If it were only optics, I would have hired an actress. That answer should not have affected me." It did. My rules were simple, and I gave them to him without perfume. No approaching candidates outside my process. No gifts unless approved, no punitive behavior after rejection. No treating my introductions as auditions for a board meeting. No punishing me if the truth about him proved unflattering at that. One corner of his mouth moved as if it had once known a smile and misplaced it years ago. "You think I frighten women," he said. "I think powerful men mistake compliance for affection every day. And you don't." No, he accepted that too calmly. Which was somehow worse than arrogance. He left without offering a blank check. Instead he said, "If you take the case, Miss Rossi, I want 6 introductions, not 20, not a catalog. 6 women you would trust in your own house." The specificity felt like respect. I hated that I noticed. I took the case before the story takes an unexpected turn. Take a second to support the channel by subscribing if you love gripping romance stories like this. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. I read your comments every day. Now let's continue. For the first 2 days, I told myself it was professional curiosity. Elite matchmaking is less about romance than people think. It is vetting, values, discretion, long interviews, and longer silences. The occasional private investigator, the frequent reminder that compatibility matters more than spectacle. Wealthy clients imagine they are shopping. What they are actually doing is exposing the shape of their loneliness to a stranger with a legal pad. Gabriel's mother called on Wednesday. Her voice carried that unmistakable old-world music, a velvet firmness. The kind of tone that can bless you and correct you in the same sentence. "You are Bianca Rossi." "Yes, my son says you are difficult." I choose to hear that as praise. To my surprise, she laughed. Good, he needs someone who does not confuse silence with depth. That was my first glimpse of Serafina Morello. And it explained more than Gabriel had. Houses like theirs are not kept human by the men whose names are on the gate. They are kept human by the women who insist there will be bread, basil, birthdays, and no shoes in the kitchen. I built 6 candidate files. The first was Alessandra DeSantis. 35, elegant, multilingual, old family on both sides. Charity boards, opera subscriptions, and the kind of bone structure that makes photographers grateful. She was not cruel, not shallow, not mercenary. She was simply too well trained in the architecture of polished lives. I arranged their first meeting at a private preview in a museum annex on the Upper East Side. Alessandra arrived in winter white and spoke to Gabriel with the smooth assurance of a woman who had been seated near influential men since childhood. She asked after Serafina before asking anything about him. That was smart. She mentioned old neighborhoods, church festivals, proper olive oil, and once told a story about her grandmother guarding the Sunday rag as if it were crown jewels. Gabriel listened with impeccable manners. Anyone watching from 10 feet away would have seen a match. Then coffee arrived, and Alessandra lowered her voice. "Your mother is wise," she said. "A house like yours should not appear unfinished forever." Gabriel's hand paused near his cup. "Unfinished. You know what I mean," she said gently. "Families need calm. Investors do too. Marriage settles conversation." There it was, the fatal sentence. She had mistaken a man for a headline management strategy. Afterward, he walked me to the curb where his driver waited beside a black sedan. Traffic hissed along the avenue. He buttoned his coat and said, "She knows how rooms are arranged." Yes. She does not care who sleeps in them. I crossed Alessandra off the list that night. Not because she was false, because she was correct in all the wrong ways. The second candidate was Jordan Hala, 41, divorce litigator. Impossible to flatter, famously allergic to vague men. Jordan had silver at her temples, a dry voice, and the unnerving stillness of people who bill by the hour and never waste one. I set their meeting in my office on a rainy afternoon because I wanted Gabriel on neutral ground. Jordan studied him for exactly 12 minutes before saying, "You don't need a wife. You need someone to witness your self-control and call it intimacy." I nearly dropped my pen. Gabriel did not blink. "That's a quick verdict. I prepare for important clients." She asked him how often he raised his voice. Whether anyone entered his home without knocking. Whether his future wife would be free to leave for a weekend without being tracked. Whether he knew the difference between protection and possession. Whether a woman could have a locked drawer in his house and keep its contents private. Some questions he answered well. Others made silence gather in the room like weather. Finally Jordan said, "What happens when you wound someone unintentionally?" He looked down at his hands. That silence answered more than any polished denial could have. When Jordan left, she shook mine and ignored his offered hand. Not rudely, simply accurately. "He is teachable," she said. With him standing right there. That might save lives. Gabriel watched the rain stripe my office window. "Do you always send women to autopsy your clients?" "Only the promising ones." The almost smile came and went so quickly it might have been a trick of light. The third woman was Pilar Vega, 32, gallery owner. Quick wit, scarlet lipstick, dangerous laugh. If Jordan had shown me Gabriel's blind spots, Pilar would show me whether joy still fit anywhere inside him. They met during a private artist dinner in Tribeca. Pilar greeted Gabriel by looking at his black suit and saying, "You dress like a man attending his own warning label." For one terrible second I thought he would shut down. Then he laughed. Not politely, not strategically. A real laugh, low and startled. Like a locked window lifting after years of paint. Pilar saw it. So, did I. She led him through canvases and half-finished installations. Made him choose his least favorite painting. And extracted from him the opinion that one gray abstract piece looked like a headache with framing. She laughed hard enough to steady herself on a plinth. And Gabriel watched her the way men watch a language they didn't know they missed. Then something happened I could not unsee. An assistant dropped a glass across the room. Gabriel's head turned, not toward the sound. But toward me. It was not dramatic, just instinct, quick. Involuntary, almost embarrassed. He found me standing near a bronze sculpture with my notebook closed. His shoulders eased before he looked back at Pilar. Later Pilar joined me near the coat check. "He likes me," she said. "He does. But every time the room shifts, he checks whether you're still in it." I kept my face neutral. "You're imagining things." Pilar sipped champagne. "I own a gallery, Bianca. My entire profession is expensive pattern recognition." She declined a second date the next morning. The fourth candidate was Dr. Elena Costa, 37, geriatric cardiologist. Practical shoes, calm hands, and no patience for theatrical masculinity. I chose her because Serafina mattered too much to Gabriel for any real future wife to treat aging like an inconvenience. Hidden behind floral arrangements. I arranged their meeting at a botanical conservatory in the Bronx, where winter herbs grew under glass and the air smelled faintly of rosemary and damp soil. Gabriel hated the idea until I told him to stop thinking like a man and start thinking like a son. Elena did not compliment his watch or his name. She asked whether Serafina still gardened. "Every day," Gabriel said. "Does she still use full-size clay pots?" He blinked. "Yes." Then stopped that immediately. For the first time, I saw him listen without defense. Elena explained raised beds, lighter containers. Benches placed near work rather than away from it. Wider garden paths, ergonomic tools. The difference between helping and erasing. "Adult children always want to take the dangerous thing away," she said, brushing her fingers over a basil leaf. "What preserves dignity is often modification, not surrender." Gabriel went very still. Elena went on. "If your mother loves that garden, don't steal the last useful fight from her. Make the fight smaller." I watched his face change. Not soften, exactly, open, when the walk ended. Gabriel asked if he might introduce Elena to Serafina. She held his gaze. "As a physician, yes. As your bride?" "No." "Why?" "Because you don't need a candidate today," she said. "You need the truth more than you need a woman." He took that one silently. On the drive back downtown, neither of us spoke for several blocks. Rain silvered the windows. Finally he said, "Do you agree with her?" "I think she understands the difference between care and conquest." That is not a comfortable sentence. The useful ones rarely are. The fifth candidate was Claire Donnelly. 38,
director of a nonprofit that housed families near pediatric hospitals.
Widowed 5 years. With a daughter named Lucy who wore combat boots with dresses and spoke to adults as if she had already reviewed their resumes. I chose Claire because Gabriel needed to see what a real home sounded like. Not a flawless house, a real one. With interruptions, backpacks, laughter from the wrong room. Homework on a polished table, life refusing to behave. Their first meeting took place at one of Claire's fundraising breakfasts. Gabriel offered to underwrite half the housing wing before dessert. I kicked him under the table. He looked at me with genuine surprise.
No rescue gestures, I murmured. It needs funding.
Then give anonymously after the coffee. He lifted a finger to his consigliere. Matteo, who stood near the doorway pretending to admire floral centerpieces.
The donation went anonymous before the check could become an ego.
That small correction told me more about him than a dozen grand speeches might have. Claire introduced Lucy, who looked Gabriel up and down and said, "Do you own one jacket that isn't planning a murder?" Claire closed her eyes. Lucy. Gabriel considered the question as if it deserved a serious answer. "1, maybe 2. Then wear those." He laughed again. Softer this time, and Lucy immediately decided he was salvageable. For 10 reckless days.
I thought Claire might be the answer. Serafina adored her.
Lucy inspected the Morello kitchen and announced that any house with copper pots that expensive had better serve decent meatballs.
Claire moved through the estate without shrinking for it.
She did not flirt with danger, she simply refused to perform around it. And that was precisely why losing her hurt.
The rupture came at a charity dinner hosted by Lucinda Orsini.
Serafina's cousin by marriage and the sort of woman who could turn malice into etiquette if given enough crystal stemware. Lucinda had been spreading little rumors about me for weeks.
That Bianca Rossi was too personally invested in her most powerful client. That Rossi Private Introductions specialized in placing its owner near inherited wealth and calling it discretion.
2 clients had paused their files. One woman told my assistant she preferred a matchmaker less likely to become part of the inventory. I could survive gossip about myself.
My mother's name was harder. At that dinner,
Lucinda kissed Claire's cheek, complimented Serafina's diamonds, and then looked at me as if I were something smudged on the guest list. "And this is Bianca Rossi," she said to a table full of old money. "How modern. Every family needs someone to manage delicate tasks." Serafina's gaze sharpened. Claire went still. Lucy frowned openly. Gabriel heard it. I know he did because I saw the moment land. His eyes moved to Lucinda. Then to me. And he said nothing. Not because he agreed. Not because he did not understand. Because men like Gabriel have spent their lives mistaking contained silence for strength. In that moment, his restraint became cowardice wearing expensive tailoring. I answered before anyone else could. Some tasks only seem delicate when courage is missing. A few people laughed too carefully. Lucinda smiled with all her teeth. Dinner moved on. That was the worst part. Nothing exploded. Humiliation almost never arrives with music. It arrives under candlelight, while everyone chooses convenience.
Later Gabriel caught me near the cloakroom.
I should have spoken. Yes, I was trying not to make the evening worse. You made it clearer. His face closed with pain rather than anger, which would have been easier to dismiss.
Claire called me the next afternoon. "I liked him," she said. And her voice already sounded tired. "That's the problem." I sat at my desk and stared at my mother's old fountain pen.
"I liked the way he listened to my daughter," Claire said. "I liked the way his mother looked at us like she was imagining Christmas, but I've buried one marriage already. I am not building a second around a man whose first instinct is to go mute when another woman is being diminished. I had no defense against that because she was right." She still attended Serafina's birthday dinner later. But only because Lucy had made a card and Claire believed disappointed adults should remain civilized long enough for children to learn how. Candidate 6 was Francesca Orsini, Lucinda's niece, 34, educated in Boston. Elegant without effort, deeply decent, and exactly the sort of match family committees approve because she can be explained in one sentence. My pride wanted to throw her file into the Hudson. My professionalism did not let me. Serafina invited everyone for tea at the Morello estate on a Sunday afternoon. The house sat on a bluff above the Hudson. Grand without vulgarity, old stone, black shutters, iron gates, and, behind it all, a kitchen that smelled like garlic. Tomatoes, bread dough, basil, rosemary, and memory. Serafina had already started the sauce before breakfast, Lucy later informed me with reverence. A towel covered rising bread near the window. Men had espresso on the terrace. Women moved in and out with serving spoons and opinions. Somewhere a radio played old Neapolitan songs. It was not a house. It was a country with borders enforced by one aging queen. Francesca arrived in cream wool and perfect manners. She was lovely with Serafina. She spoke to Gabriel as if he were a person.
Not a rumor. I hated how much I liked her.
Then Lucinda decided to be stupid twice. She lifted her teacup and said, "Some women understand family expectations without needing professional instruction." This time Gabriel set his cup down with a sound so small the whole room noticed. "Miss Rossi," he said without taking his eyes off Lucinda, "has shown more honor in 6 weeks than most people manage in a lifetime of family dinners." Lucinda's face went colorless. He continued, "If you speak about her with that tone again in my mother's house, you will explain yourself to every trustee at the September review. And you may use smaller words if the truth frightens you." Serafina did not interrupt. She only said, very softly, "At last." Francesca found me later in the hallway outside the library. "I think I was invited as a solution," she said. "You were invited because you're a strong candidate." "No," she said kindly. "I am a safe one." "It is not the same thing." She glanced toward the drawing room where Gabriel was helping his mother adjust the shawl over her shoulders. "He's beginning to understand that late, but not too late. If the story ended there, it would have been cleaner. It did not. The rumors around my agency kept moving. Wealth protects itself with whispers when it cannot use contracts. One client withdrew. Another asked whether my screening process included my own emotional entanglements. My assistant Nina nearly committed a homicide with stationery. Then 4 days before Serafina's birthday, I found the box. I had gone into our archive room looking for an old confidentiality policy my mother had written after some hedge fund heir tried to poach a widow from another client list. My mother labeled storage with the creativity of a woman convinced future generations did not deserve convenience. I found a carton marked napkins that contained no napkins at all. Only tied bundles of correspondence, intake notes, recipe cards, and one slim folder with a name that froze me where I stood, Serafina Morello. The first page was dated 26 years earlier. My mother had not matched Serafina with a husband. Serafina was already married then. She had come to Rosa Rossi for something stranger and somehow more intimate. My mother's notes were crisp, private, devastating. Serafina does not want rescue. She wants rituals. Husband rules through silence. Son studies doors before entering rooms. She fears the boy will learn command before welcome.
Recommendations: weekly family supper without staff.
Bread kneaded by hand, garden rows assigned to child. One question each night about what made him laugh before what he achieved. Music in the kitchen, permission for noise. I sat down on the floor between the archive shelves because my knees no longer seemed dependable. There was a letter tucked into the back. Written in Serafina's slanted hand, Rosa. He still startles when men enter too quickly. But now he asks for more sauce, which I choose to count as progress. You told me a house can become a bunker if no one insists on ordinary tenderness. I have been insisting, thank you. I read it twice. Then once more with my hand over my mouth.
Serafina had known my mother, not casually, not socially.
She had trusted her, and when Gabriel came to me, Serafina had not merely thought of a reputable agency. She had thought of Rosa Rossi's daughter. For one painful hour, that felt like betrayal. Had I been hired because of my work? Or because an aging mother believed another woman's daughter might finish what the first one began? Had Gabriel known? Had Serafina? Had everyone been playing chess with my dignity while I congratulated myself for professionalism? I called Serafina that night. She did not pretend. Yes, she said when I asked why she had sent her son specifically to me. I trusted your mother once.
And I trusted you before you trusted yourself.
That is not as kind as you think it sounds. No, she said. It sounds like what it is.
A mother running out of time and choosing the one name that once helped her keep a home from hardening.
You should have told me. Yes. Did Gabriel know? No. That answer mattered.
Not enough, but it mattered. When I hung up, I drafted a case closure letter. Nina read it and said,
"This is very polished. Thank you." That was not praise. Before I could answer, Matteo arrived. Gabriel's consigliere did not enter like a gangster. He entered like a man sent to deliver paperwork that might detonate emotionally. He handed me a folder. Inside was the agenda for the Morello board review and a signed statement from Gabriel to the trustees.
It declared that Rossi Private Introductions had operated with complete independence, that any attempt to weaponize gossip against my business would be considered defamatory interference,
and that if any board member wished to discuss my reputation, they could do so on the record before council. Attached to it was a note in Gabriel's handwriting.
I should have protected your name before it became strategically useful to do so. I did not know my mother had known yours.
I know that is not enough, it is only the truth, G. That note did not erase my anger, it made it harder to keep simple. The next day, Gabriel faced the board. I only learned details later.
Mostly because Nina had a gift for extracting information from assistants and chauffeurs with the moral
innocence of a jewel thief. The meeting took place in a glass conference room downtown. Trustees asked about stability,
optics, succession, household reputation.
One uncle reportedly used the phrase domestic uncertainty. Gabriel placed 6 anonymized candidate summaries on the table and said, "This process was undertaken because my mother asked for honesty. Not a shareholder presentation disguised as marriage." When one cousin smiled, Gabriel added, "If this family has reached the point where a woman's professional reputation is considered acceptable collateral for internal theater, then the problem is not my household."
No one laughed after that.
2 pause clients called my office the following morning, asking if we had reopened intake appointments.
Then Gabriel came himself. He stood in front of my desk and did not sit. Men who want forgiveness usually try to lower the room around them. Gabriel made no such attempt.
I should have said something at Lucinda's dinner. Yes. I should have asked before sending anything to the trustees. Yes. I did not know my mother had known yours. I believed him.
That irritated me, he continued. When I found out, I was angry with her, and then with myself.
Because some part of me had been grateful from the beginning that you saw me clearly. And now I do not know where gratitude ends and inheritance begins. That sentence was too honest to dismiss. You embarrassed me, I said. Yes. You damaged my business. Yes. You keep doing the right thing one beat too late. Pain moved across his face with surgical precision. Yes, we stood there with all of it between us. Finally he said, quieter,
"My mother still wants you at her birthday dinner."
As the woman who handled the case, nothing more.
I have no right to ask for anything more. I should have refused. Instead, I heard myself say,
"The case ends that night." Yes,
if anything turns theatrical,
I leave, you should.
And after that,
whatever happens with my business happens on my terms. His gaze held mine. It should. That was how I agreed to attend the dinner that almost ruined me.
Serafina's birthday arrived under clear September light.
The West Terrace had been transformed without crossing into vulgarity. White linen, candle bowls floating in shallow water. Old silver, strings playing near the hedges. Along the stone wall behind the herb garden stood 3 new raised beds.
Cedar and elegant, filled with rosemary, thyme, basil,
and dwarf tomatoes. A bench sat close enough that Serafina could supervise while pretending she still did everything herself. Elena Costa had been right. Gabriel had listened. Serafina wore navy silk, a thin gold cross, and a silver comb that pinned her hair with the sort of dignity younger women spend fortunes trying to imitate. She looked smaller than the first time I heard her voice, but no less formidable. Guests arrived slowly. Alessandra in pale satin, Jordan in black in judgment, Pilar in green with an irreverent grin. Elena straight from the hospital with tired eyes, Claire with Lucy, who carried a handmade card and looked determined to behave until dessert. Francesca came alone and kissed Serafina on both cheeks. Every woman had a reason to refuse the evening. Every woman came anyway. That mattered more than anyone said aloud. Gabriel appeared just before supper, not dressed to impress. Dressed like a man bracing for honesty. He crossed first to his mother, then to the guests. And only then let his eyes find me near the terrace doors. I had told myself I belonged there, at the edge, notebook in hand. Professional until the last possible breath. Dinner moved with the fragile beauty of gatherings where everyone understands more than decorum permits. Lucy informed Serafina that the card featured a cat because old people like practical affection. Pilar made Jordan snort wine through her nose. Elena slowed the service without making Serafina feel monitored. Francesca charmed 3 terrifying aunts into discussing opera instead of inheritance. Claire was kind and composed and, once, when Gabriel bent to hear Lucy's joke, I saw the old hurt cross her face like weather moving over water. Then Serafina stood. Gabriel rose instantly to help her. She lifted one finger and he stopped. That small obedience nearly undid me. My friends, she said, and the garden quieted. At my age, a woman is allowed less patience for ceremony and more appetite for truth. A low laugh moved through the tables. My son believed I wanted a bride for my birthday. That was not quite right. She looked at Gabriel. Then at the women gathered around her table. I wanted proof that he still knew how to choose with his heart awake. Silence sharpened. She continued. Each of you gave him something. Honesty, discomfort, laughter, patience, mercy. And in 1 or 2 cases, the educational value of refusal. Jordan lifted her glass 2 inches. Serafina smiled. Years ago, she said, when my house was too full of careful men and too empty of ordinary tenderness, a woman named Rosa Rossi reminded me that homes survive on rituals. Not fear, her daughter stands with us tonight. My throat closed. I felt faces turn toward me and hated it and could not breathe through it. Serafina did not look at me again. She looked at Gabriel. So, my son, tell me what you learned. He stood slowly. I have never seen a room lean toward a person like that garden lean toward Gabriel Morello. He did not begin with me. That mattered. He turned first to Alessandra. You reminded me that elegance can keep a house flawless and still leave it cold. Alessandra inclined her head with the grace of a woman too intelligent to mistake honesty for insult. To Jordan he said, you made me hear how often. Control borrows the language of care, Jordan said. Borrowing implies intention. Sometimes it's just bad training. A few people laughed. Gabriel almost did to Pilar. You made me laugh before I was ready. Which means you were probably dangerous in the healthiest possible way. Pilar pressed a hand to her chest. Finally, a review worth framing, to Elena. You showed me that love for an aging parent is not proven by taking everything away. Elena's expression softened. Serafina touched the edge of her napkin, pleased to Claire. His voice changed. You showed me what a warm house sounds like. And I am sorry I asked you to stand near my silence when you had already earned better. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then nodded once. Not forgiveness, not cruelty. Something harder and cleaner. Lucy whispered audibly. That was decent. Claire squeezed her hand without looking away. To Francesca, Gabriel said, you could have been the easiest answer in the room. You were kinder than that. Francesca lifted her glass toward him with quiet approval. Then he turned toward the terrace. Toward me, the garden seemed to contract. Candlelight trembled in every bowl. Somewhere beyond the hedge, the river moved in the dark like a long withheld thought. No woman here deserves to be chosen by a man whose attention keeps leaving the table, he said. I stopped breathing. His gaze did not trap me. That mattered more than anyone there understood. He stayed where he was. Far enough away that refusal could still look like dignity rather than spectacle. Bianca Rossi, he said. And my name in his voice sounded far more dangerous than any title the newspapers had ever given him. I hired you because I thought a wife was something a disciplined man could procure with enough honesty and enough time pressure. Instead, you did your actual job. You refused my shortcuts. You protected women from my confusion. You defended your own name when I failed to defend it quickly enough. You made it impossible for me to mistake admiration for truth. My fingers tightened around the notebook so hard the leather bent. He went on, quieter now. I am not asking you to marry me. I am not turning my mother's birthday into a public claim. I am asking one thing only, when this case is closed. When your business is protected on your terms. When you have decided whether there is any peace left for me in your life. Would you allow me to take you to dinner and start clean? Even if I do not deserve clean beginnings. No one moved. I looked first at Serafina. There was no triumph in her face, only hope. And the discipline not to weaponize it. I looked at Claire, at Jordan, at Francesca. At Pilar with tears bright in her eyes, at Lucy studying me like a junior judge. At 6 women who had each been honest enough not to become props in a story that did not belong to them. Then I looked back at Gabriel. You remain a very difficult client, I said. Relief flickered across his face so nakedly I almost smiled. So I've been told. You are late. Yes. You are not forgiven on schedule. I know. I let the notebook fall to my side. Dinner, I said. One dinner. The garden exhaled. Gabriel did not touch me. He did not close the distance and turn permission into possession. He only bowed his head once, almost like a man humbled by an answer he had no right to expect. That was the first moment I thought love might survive him. The party continued, but nothing remained ordinary after that. Lucinda left before coffee. Pilar stole 3 miniature cannoli for the car. Jordan informed Matteo that if he ever needed a lawyer, she charged extra for men who said less than necessary. Claire took Lucy home before the music ended because, as she later told me, happiness can hurt and children should see adults leave before hurt becomes unkindness. After the last guest drifted away, I stood alone near the new herb beds. The night smelled of basil and wax and river air. Music cases were being closed near the terrace. Inside the house, Serafina was laughing at something Nina should never have said to an 80-year-old aunt. Gabriel came to stand beside me, careful as ever now with space. The case is closed, I said. Yes, you owe my agency a final payment. I brought a normal check. I looked at him. Progress. I am trying. The honesty in that nearly wrecked me more than the speech. What happens tomorrow? I asked. He considered. My mother sleeps late. Matteo pretends he was not emotional. Lucinda begins repairing social damage, because my mother will make the alternative expensive. You open your office. I call and ask if 7 o'clock is too formal. It is 6:30, less alarming. His mouth curved. Not much, just enough to change his whole face. Then 6:30. Our first months were awkward in ways I came to love because awkwardness is honest. We moved slowly because I insisted on it and because Gabriel once told the terms, obeyed them with an intensity almost tender. He learned that courtship is not logistics. He sent flowers once, white lily. And I told him funeral homes had permanently ruined them. The next week he brought rosemary instead because Serafina said my mother used to keep it on every windowsill. He once reserved a private room in a restaurant so silent it felt like a witness protection program for rich people. I made him take me instead to a loud neighborhood place in Brooklyn where children spilled Parmesan and nobody cared that his surname carried headlines. He learned to call instead of dispatching drivers. He learned not every problem is an emergency requiring strategy. He learned that if I went quiet, it usually meant I was hurt. Not leaving. He learned my coffee order, my hatred of orchids, and the fact that I read the last page of a novel first when anxious. A habit he called criminal until he caught himself doing it with a legal thriller. I learned him too. He disliked crowds but tolerated them if Serafina wanted live music. He remembered every promise and punished himself too severely for minor failures. He could sit through a meeting with the unreadable calm of a man born inside Omerta, and then spend 15 minutes choosing peaches, because his mother's appetite had gone fickle. He did not like being touched unexpectedly. Eventually he liked it if the hand was mine, 3 months after the birthday. Claire wrote me a letter. Lucy has decided Mr. Morello dresses less like a suspect and more like a principal now.
I am not sure that is the compliment she intends.
But I'm passing it along. I wanted you to know I'm all right. A man from the hospital board asked me to coffee. I said no, then called him back and changed it to yes. Some griefs stop being houses if you do not keep redecorating them. Don't waste what he learned. Be happy, Bianca. Not beautifully, honestly. I cried harder over that letter than over anything Gabriel ever said to me. Grace is heavier when it costs the person offering it something real. Our first kiss happened in my office on a Tuesday evening while helping me move archive boxes because Nina had sprained her wrist and refused to admit it. One carton split open, old index cards scattered across the rug. Gabriel caught one before it slid under the radiator. It was a note in my mother's handwriting attached to a client file from 1988. He thinks love must arrive like weather, teach him it can also arrive like lamplight. Gabriel read it, looked at me, and asked very quietly, "May I?" That almost undid me more than the question itself. Men who have been obeyed all their lives do not always know how holy permission sounds when spoken correctly. Yes, I said. The kiss was careful, devastating, and entirely unlike the versions my imagination had built to protect me from the real thing. He did not take, he waited. His hand touched my face as if tenderness were a skill he had been learning in secret and feared failing at. Afterward he leaned his forehead to mine and laughed once under his breath. "What?" I whispered. "Nothing," he said. "Only that your mother and mine would be unbearable about this." He was right. By winter, Serafina had claimed me without subtlety. Sunday supper at the Morello house became less of an event and more of a border crossing. The kitchen still belonged to her. Sauce simmered for hours. Bread rested under towels. Men still drifted outside after eating for espresso and digestivo. But the rooms had changed. Fear had not vanished. Histories do not evaporate because two people kiss in an office. But warmth no longer had to ask permission before entering. Lucy appeared often enough to become opinionated about Gabriel's ties. Pilar sent a small painting for the library with a note that read, "For the man who finally stopped decorating with restraint." Jordan mailed a prenuptial checklist 6 months before there was any proposal and labeled it a public service. Francesca fell in love with a cellist from Philadelphia just to prove family expectations had no jurisdiction over her. And Gabriel, without announcement, became the sort of man who poured his mother's water instead of summoning staff to do it.
The proposal happened a year later in the least theatrical way possible, which is to say, perfectly.
He came to my office on an ordinary Tuesday carrying one of my mother's old recipe tins. Nina let him in and vanished with the speed of a woman who had waited 12 months for a front row seat without wanting to contaminate the scene. Inside the tin was a folded recipe card in my mother's handwriting. Sunday bread, enough for a full table. And then below it, in smaller ink, leave one place empty if you must. Life has a way of filling honest spaces. Beneath the card sat a ring, simple, elegant. Impossible to accuse of manipulation. Gabriel came around the desk and knelt.
Not theatrically, not performatively.
Just like a man placing certainty where once there had only been control. "Bianca Rossi," he said. "You were hired to find me a bride, and instead you taught me
that a wife is not a solution, a symbol, a defense against gossip, or a reward a man receives for becoming slightly less insufferable.
I love you because you tell me the truth before it becomes convenient.
I love you because my mother sleeps easier when you are in the house. I love you because when I am with you, the rooms stop feeling guarded and start feeling lived in.
I am asking if you will marry me, not to complete my life for me, but to share one I now know how to open. For once I had no cleverness at all. I said yes before the tears could embarrass either of us when we told Serafina. She cried for 11 seconds and then began assigning seating as if heaven had personally approved the guest list. We married the next spring under the same terrace lights where he had once asked for one dinner. Alessandra attended with a novelist who adored her and was properly frightened by her. Jordan wore navy and informed Matteo the bar contract was suspiciously under-negotiated. Pilar did the flowers because she claimed florists were cowards. Elena monitored Serafina's pulse from 10 feet away without anyone noticing. Claire came with Lucy, who announced I looked appropriately dramatic.
Francesca cried during the vows and denied it magnificently.
Nina caught the bouquet and threatened litigation.
Serafina sat in the front row with her silver comb in place and one hand over her mouth through the entire ceremony. After the music softened and the last of the older relatives had gone inside to complain about dessert in that affectionate way only families can manage,
Gabriel found me beside the herb beds. The rosemary had grown thick by then. The bench remained. The raised beds were full. Serafina still worked them, just more slowly, with lighter pots and shorter tools and a kingdom narrowed enough to remain hers.
Gabriel took my hand and looked out toward the dark river.
"Do you ever think about the first day?" he asked.
"When I came to hire you, yes, and I thought of 6 women honest enough to refuse becoming symbols.
I thought of Lucinda's poison and Claire's grace and Jordan's merciless questions and Pilar's laughter and Elena's bench by the basil and Francesca refusing to be the easiest answer. I thought of my mother's file box, Serafina's letter, and a man who once believed love could be arranged under pressure, learning instead that it had to be invited, protected, and asked for with his hands open.
Then I looked at my husband. "No," I said softly.
"I do not regret it." He kissed my temple.
"What are you thinking?"
"Then,
that my mother was right."
"About what?" "That the hardest matches are never the ones where 2 people want each other.
They're the ones where one of them still believes love is something that can be hired, managed, or timed, and then meets the woman who makes all of that impossible." Gabriel laughed.
That real laugh now, warm and unafraid. The one that no longer checked the door before arriving. Inside the house, Serafina called for more bread. And for the first time in his life, Gabriel Morello did not enter at the edge of the room, as if he were still deciding whether he belonged there. He went in like a man expected home.
But every ending opens the door to another unforgettable story. The next romance
I'm working on begins with one impossible promise and one dangerous secret that changes everything.
Can you guess what it's about?
Tell me your prediction in the comments, and also let me know which romance theme you want me to bring next. The most requested idea could become my next story. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you in the next story.